Okay, hello, welcome to another edition of the Skull Session podcast. And I'm gonna let you say your name because I'm sure I'm gonna screw it up.
Armand Rosamilia.
Okay. So yeah, Armand Rosamilia. That's your guess. All right, man. So what have you got going on? What's going what are you putting out? What are you working on? Let me know.
A ton of stuff. I just had a couple of new releases that just came out recently. St. John's River Monster. It's a monster book from Severed Press that
Okay.
came out a few days ago. It's based on, I'm in Jacksonville, Florida. It's based on the our cryptid that is in the St. John's River that's been spotted dozens of times in the last 150 years or so. So I kind of play around with that a little bit. That is my latest. About a week before that, I put out Seal the Deal, which is a suspense thriller. And basically, the premise is you get a knock at your door, and the guy says you've already been picked to die, but if you pick someone else that you love to die in your place, then you will live. And what do the people do in that? What would you do in that situation? Would you shake his hand and seal the deal? So that's kind of the premise on that one. That one's self-published. At the time, of course, when you're working, I'm a hybrid, so I do a lot of self-publishing stuff, and I also work with a lot of publishers. Sometimes you get everything crossed, and I'll have two or three different things that come out, and I also have a couple of anthologies that also I have stories and that also came out in the last couple of weeks. So it's crazy the amount of releases you get piled in all at once, and then it's like, okay, now I gotta have to promote 4 books this week.
You have a favorite press that you work with?
I've worked with a bunch of different ones. Severed Press is fun because I pitched them a bunch of different monster books. I had a book that came out a few months ago with them called High on Bigfoot. It's basically Bigfoot killing illegal marijuana growers in the mountains. That was a fun book to write. And actually, I think they're going to do a German edition of it as well. So
Going off into conspiracy territory for a moment, what do you think about Bigfoot? Do you think that Bigfoot's real? Do you think it's based on a myth? What do you think?
I'd like to think it's real, right? Wouldn't that be cool if there really was Bigfoot out there?
Right.
I don't believe in a lot of cryptids and stuff, which is funny because right now I'm working on a nonfiction Florida cryptid book for a publisher. But reading all these different things, do I believe something's out there? Yeah, sure. I mean, I watch a lot of the Bigfoot shows, and I end up yelling at the screen a lot of times. Like that's not a squirrel did that, or there's bears in that
Yeah, a lot
area.
of the shows are ridiculous, like the
Yeah,
ghost hunters, where they're like, I think I heard a noise.
yeah. So yeah, and that's like there's a Bigfoot show that's on now, and they're like walking through the woods where there's tons of animals, and every time they
Right.
shine a flashlight, they see, that's Bigfoot's right there. No, that's probably a wolf or I don't know, a squirrel or something. But every single track is a Bigfoot track. Every single tree that fell in the woods, Bigfoot knocked it over.
Well,
It's really
I've heard
funny.
some more credible theories are like maybe there are like Neanderthals that survived all this time. There are like a few left in the wild because I mean we find like ancient sea creatures that are still alive that we thought died
Right.
out like a million years ago. So I guess it's possible, but that seems like a little bit more credible.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be a lot of stuff out there that we haven't found. There's a ton of remote areas in the world, so I would imagine there's a chance that there's something out there. I just feel like it's going to be something we haven't even thought of. It's some weird creature that maybe is not going to rip us limb to limb, but it's something we haven't even thought of in our imaginations.
It's possible, yeah. They keep finding like new human species, like human kind of related species, like
Yeah,
like Homo habilis and stuff like that. Now at one point they said there were humans and Neanderthals, and that was it. And now they're up to what, like 8?
yeah, and they keep finding those missing links all the time, which is really cool.
Yeah. So is that what you like to focus on, more like the mythology, or do you have like kind of a diverse pantheon that you you know,
For those books, they're novellas, they're quick reads, they're like that Saturday morning horror movies that we grew up on. So it's not
kind of
it's
Tales from the
fun.
Crypt or like,
Right, yeah. They're fun books to write. Um it's basically it's you create a bunch of characters and then you figure out creative ways for Bigfoot or a sea monster or chupacabra, whatever. I mean, I've written how many I have. So I've written 9 of these so far for Severed Press. I have 3 more under contract. And basically my pitch is, hey, a monster does this. And then they say, well, what monster? I say, you tell me. And they're like, all right, let's do a Bigfoot. Can you fit a chupacabra in any of these? That kind of thing, which is a lot of fun because then I have chupacabra during a snowstorm in the Denver airport. That was a book called Trapped. And it was a lot of fun to figure out, okay, how do I get chupacabra into Denver during a snowstorm at the airport, and then create a bunch of characters around that. So a lot of it for me is just the fun of coming up with those ideas. I mean, I've written horror for 35 years. I've written horror stories. Probably for the past 5 or 6, I've written mostly crime thriller stuff. I've really decided that I love writing crime thrillers, and to be honest, it makes a lot more money than the horror stuff ever will. And so I've been full time.
it was for a long time in an extremely niche market. Like Lovecraft died poor, Poe
Yeah,
died poor.
yeah. It was never. I was never going to quit my day job just writing horror. Once I started doing crime thrillers and I started writing 400,000 to 500,000 words a year, then I was able to quit my job and go full time. So I've been full time. This will be my 13th year coming up that I'm able to make a living just writing horror books and writing crime thriller stuff and whatever I want to write.
I remember Robert Chamberlain. He wrote The King in Yellow. Like
Yeah.
like pretty. It's been kind of combined with the Cthulhu myth, but I think it's a little bit separate. I know that he was like a big influence on Lovecraft, and like I got the book of King in Yellow, and like the first few stories, like I think first 6 stories are all great horror stories. Then they're all romance because
Yeah.
horror didn't pay the bills. Romance paid the bills.
Yeah.
And it's like that very stiff, like 1920s romance. So it's like, I wasn't a fan at all. But yeah, no, that's like going with the thing. It's like, just because you love it doesn't mean it pays bills.
Right. And that was something for me to really sit down and go, okay, what am I doing? Do I want to do this for fun? Do I want to write just horror stories for fun and not do anything else? And I love crime thrillers. I grew up, reading horror and reading crime thriller stuff. So for me, it was, let me give this kind of reset and give this a shot. And it's worked. I'm doing really well with a couple of different series and a lot of standalone short stories, a bunch of different things. I went to a conference this past weekend in Tampa, NINC, Novelist Incorporated, and it's kind of like HWA or Romance Writers, any of those, but you have to have sales. You can't join unless you've had a couple of books that have sold well or you've gotten a big advance. So 400 people there, everybody there is making money, and 90% of them are romance authors. 90% of the people there are literally making $1 million a year, writing romance. And I don't think I could do it. I've ghost written a couple of military romance for a company, and I made really good money on it, and they made phenomenal money on it after it was released. But I don't think I would not want to chase the money. So for me, crime thrillers is still something that I love, something I grew up on. And I doubt I'll stop writing horror. A lot of it will be, writing it for me or writing it for Patreon, or if I see a good anthology that's coming out and they're looking for a specific theme or something. Because it's in the blood. It's something I've always read since I was a kid.
Yeah, I just did an anthology, kind of like a Tales from the Crypt, Outer Limits, Twilight Zone, sort of like and I think that was a lot of fun. People seem to like that, especially when it's like a bunch of different authors. Like
Yeah.
I noticed when you put out like a collection of just short stories, they don't sell that well. And I've had publishers tell me they don't sell that well when anybody puts them out. But it seems like having a couple different authors, stirs the pot enough to make people interested.
The fun for me is putting a story in an anthology and somebody reading me that otherwise had never heard of me. And
Right.
then they go back and they see, oh, this guy's got 200 releases on Amazon, and they start buying my backlist. And for me, that's great. An anthology is kind of like handing out a business card. You're getting a couple of bucks to write the story, but it's really to sell all the other things that I have that
Right.
are released. There's nothing worse than picking up an anthology, whether it's a crime thriller one or a horror one, and reading a really good story and then going, I'm going to read more of this guy. And then you go on Amazon, he has
I've done
nothing
the
else.
exact thing. Like with my
Yeah.
anthology, I have the story about Tim Curran, and I was like, "This is so good. What else has he put out?"
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the, for me, um, the short stories have to sell my novels, whether it's I'm putting it in the same world, I'm referring to them, I'm putting an Easter egg in a story or something, but it has to make sense with the mythos of everything else that I'm writing.
Do you kind of keep that Stephen King continuity where like everything's kind of roughly in the same world?
Yeah, for me it was growing up reading Lovecraft and reading Robert E. Howard's Conan, but also reading all of his horror
Who
stuff,
was
all
a
the
pen
weird
pal of
stuff.
Lovecraft, by the way?
Yeah, well, and that's and, August Derleth, all those guys were pen pals, and Lovecraft let them share in his mythos, which I
Right.
thought was great. So, over time, reading all those short stories, the collections of all those other great authors that wrote Lovecraftian weird tale stories, that mythos, I decided, that's a really good thing for me to use cameos in different books and different things that have happened, and kind of set all my horror stuff in the same world. And so that's been a lot of fun. And then I do the same thing with my crime thriller stuff. There's a lot of the same places and characters, and the mobster organizations are all the same throughout all the books and everything else. So for me, that was, and it's all in my head. I'm a total pantser. So for me to keep it, instead of trying to every book I have to create something totally brand new, I'm just kind of like, I'll pull in a little from here, I'll pull in a little from here, and I'll write something new.
Do you see something that has totally pulled off that like crime genre or like the like what specifically would you call it? Would you say it was a crime genre, like a little bit of a mobster genre?
I write thrillers, so it's got a little bit of everything. There's I'm in a group called Tropical Authors, and we write a lot of our stories in exotic places. So I wrote a 6-book set in Jacksonville Beach here, and it's called the First Coast Thriller Series. And they're repo men who are repoing speedboats, and they find one that's full of cocaine from a drug cartel from South America. And so the cartel wants their drugs back. They want their boat back.
I'm sure that's happened.
Well, yeah, and I mean it's a lot of it is based on living in Florida for 20 something years. A lot of that is those things happen all the time. And so for me, it was, what kind of fun. The next series I'm doing is a six-parter next year, and it'll be serial killers. But with that thriller, instead of the horror serial killers, the thriller version of serial killers. So it won't get into the murder, the details of the murder and everything, but there's FBI is searching for a serial killer.
Well, what I was going to ask is, are there like movies or books you say that that captured what I want to put across? That captured kind of my theme, my vision, whatever. Even if, I'm not saying you directly copy it. I'm just saying that you're like, yeah, that's good inspiration.
Oh, we watch stuff me and my wife watch stuff all the time that's inspiration. Any of the Netflix, the Harlan Coben mini series that they do, Bosch is a great one. The Lincoln Lawyer is another really good one. So those are some of the ones. But I watch a ton of different crime thriller movies and series, and we watch that stuff all the time.
Okay. Are there any books that kind of capture the vibe you're going for?
Yeah, there's a lot of really, really good writers. There's a writer who writes stuff either set in Chicago, where he was born, or here in Jacksonville, Michael Wiley, and
Okay.
he's a phenomenal author. I also like, the classics. Randy Wayne White is kind of the OG of tropical author writing. Tim Dorsey, Carl Hyzen, those are the authors that I grew up on reading. Really cool crime thriller things, and Mickey Spillane is it's there's a
Right,
lot of
right.
the old school that are great, and a lot of those great movies
I can
from
tell that
those.
you're a fan of this stuff, not just like this is what I gotta do to make money. You
No,
know.
no, I'm a fan.
Okay. So what makes the determination of whether it should go to a big publisher or a small publisher? You publish it yourself. You know, how do you decide that?
So in 2015, um, Amazon did a thing called Kindle Scout, where they basically you wrote they didn't want horror, and so they were like, okay, we want romance, we want thrillers, we want the big selling genres. And I was right in the middle of working on a horror book called Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good,
It's like
stolen
the
from the
Megadeth album, yeah.
Megadeth album, right? And it was about a guy who killed children for a living, and it was really dark, and I have kids, and I was like, should I write this? And then when I saw this Kindle Scout thing, and there was no horror, I was like, you know what? I'm going to write this book, but I'm going to write it where he doesn't actually kill the children; he saves them. So whether it's like a politician, or it's a rock star or somebody, and a mistress has a kid and they don't want that kid around to ruin their lives, they pay this guy to go and supposedly kill this child and get rid of it. But
But
really,
he
what he does
doesn't,
is
yeah.
he saves the kid and he moves it through his system. And he was a product of that as well when he was a kid. So I call it Dirty Deeds. And I got a Kindle Scout now after, I think it was like 12,000 books were pitched to them and only 200 actually were published. So this book was published by them. So I have a Kindle press. I'm part of, Amazon. But the problem with it was it ends on a first book ends on a cliffhanger, and I was writing the second book already, because even if they didn't take it, I was going to publish it. And they said, we want the second book, but we want to wait a year to put it out. And I said, no way, I need two of these a year,
Right.
because it ends on a cliffhanger. I'm going to get killed on reviews first off, and I want to write a bunch of books on, So they were like, all right, no. So they still have the rights to the first one, but I'm actually working on Dirty Deeds 12 right now, and it'll be out in March next year, and that'll be the final book. So I'm putting about two out a year from 2016. I throw those out there, and it's the progression of this guy and all the different things. And so in that series, I created the Family, which is the New Jersey mob. There's a Philly mob. There's a lot of hitmen and different characters, and I've used those in other crime thriller books over the last 6 or 7 years now. When I've created other series, or use them a lot in short stories and different things. So for me, that was like kind of my jumping point to realize, I can write crime thriller stuff. I do have the chops to do this. It's not just, let me just throw a monster at some people and write a bunch of horror things.
So your decision on like what you'll self-publish and what you'd have published by someone else is partially based on when they can release it, partially based on how you think it'll sell. Is it just kind of like, hey, you're not putting out what I want when I want, so I'll just do it myself.
Yeah, you mean you writers, we write books that we want to read. We write books that aren't out there. I get an idea, and then is that an idea that I've read before? Is that an idea that somebody I know, one of my friends, is working on? I'll come up with ideas, and I'm like, I haven't seen that out there, or I want to play with that idea. For me, it's not so much of when I come up with something, should I self-publish it or should I pitch it to a publisher? I'm very blessed that a lot of publishers I've worked with for many years that will come to me, and then we'll say, "What do you have?" Crystal Lake Publishing emailed me a few months ago and said, "Hey, we're going to do a zombie novella trilogy, and I want you to head it up. I want one from you, and you pick the other two authors that are going to be involved in that." And because I worked with them for on and off for many years, and that was cool. So that came out a couple of months ago, and I hadn't written any zombies in 6 or 7 years, maybe more. I have a 9-book series called Dying Days that was finished, and I swore I was never going to write another zombie book because I'd written some 400 and something thousand words of zombie books. But then, of course, I'm like, you know what? I love working with you guys, and you will do a great job in promoting it. And I got to work with two great authors, Jay Wilburn, who passed away almost a year ago. Right before he passed, he had finished his novella, and Erin Lewis, who is a stripper turned horror author. And I had written a book called Stripper Noir with her, a crime thriller book set in a strip club. And so I loved the way she thought, and I knew she was a big fan of zombie stuff. So when I invited her, and it's been out, it's Dark Tides Volume 10 in their series. They do a different theme every book, and it's selling really well. And I'm getting a lot of people now who are going, okay, when are you writing another zombie book?
That's great. Yeah. I love when people do reference, or they look at somebody who has reference. Like, kind of what got me first published was I tattoo. I own a tattoo shop. And at the time I was like in all the magazines. So this Irish horror author named Wayne Simmons got a hold of me, and he did a zombie story. And one of the main characters was a tattoo artist. So he wanted to see if it was the accurate portrayal.
Right.
It wasn't, but he took my word, and
Yeah.
and he changed it.
That's pretty. My son also is a tattooist. I have no tattoos on my body. He always swore, "Dad, for Christmas, for your birthday, I'm going to get you a tattoo." I said, "Okay, put it on yourself, because you're not putting it on me."
What, you don't want to get your head tattooed?
Yeah, I want to do the Phil Anselmo Pantera thing. Yeah.
All right, man. So, are you focusing more on the crime thrillers these days? Are you focusing? You're doing a little bit of both. Is like one kind of more of a hobby, and one is more of like this is what pays the bills?
I still make money writing horror because I write so much. I'm so prolific, and I have a bunch of stuff. Like I said, I have 3 more books I still have to write for Severed Press in the next 12 months or so. So the way I look at it on my board is, for about the next 18 months, I'll release as much horror as I release as crime thrillers. But looking past that, it's probably going to be a lot less horror for me and more the crime thriller, because again, they're both making money, but crime thriller is making like 10 times the amount of the horror stuff. So, my problem is I cannot say no. My problem is you come to me and you go, "Hey, I need you to pitch a story for me." I'm like, okay, like I'm afraid of missing out. So I'm always constantly like, yeah. And my wife's like, "Stop doing that. You don't need to make $1 billion. You're not going to make $1 billion. Stop chasing that part of this, and just write what you want to write. Be creative, and the rest of it will fall into place."
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, whenever you try and like pitch to a market, you always fall short.
Yeah.
Um, but all right, so right now is your main focus writing crime thrillers. Do you like read other stuff, or you said you watch a lot of movies. But the reason why I'm asking is because, like, for instance, I tattoo, and people ask me, "Oh, do you watch Ink Master? Do you watch the tattoo shows?" It's like, dude, I do this all day, every day. Why would I go home and watch Ink Master, which,
Right.
by the
Yeah.
way, is incredibly fake? You
Yeah.
know, so I'm just wondering, like, do you like? But when I read novels, I'm like, oh, well, sometimes it's a little hard to like differentiate between, oh, I'd write it this way instead, but sometimes I really like where they're going with this, and the following I just lose myself in it. Do you do that? Do you have anyone you recommend?
So I normally, if I'm deep into a crime thriller novel or a horror novel, I won't read that genre. at that point. I will like I'm really doing Dirty Deeds 12 right now is what my focus is. So I'm reading more horror stuff. I love anthologies. I love reading short stories. So I have a couple of different horror short story collections that I'm reading and things like that. I try to you get burned out, like you just said, you get burned out, like the old joke, the gynecologist comes home and the wife takes her clothes off and he's like, oh no, not another one of those today.
Yeah, I haven't heard that joke.
Yeah. So I mean, it's like you get burned out sometimes. My wife loves watching Investigation Discovery. I mean, that channel is always on in this house. So at some points, I'm like, I'm gonna go read or I'm gonna go do something else because there's so much. You can only watch so many shows where somebody is being kidnapped, somebody is being killed, those kind of things where I'm just like, let's watch a comedy special, let's watch a romantic comedy, let's just watch something kind of like, cleanse my brain of constantly thinking about different ways to kill people, watching people getting killed in different ways and stuff. Sometimes you just, sometimes you need a break.
Right. Yeah, people, I think, attitudes have changed quite a bit, but at one point, like, if you were into, like, those kind of books, you were that kind of person. Like, people need to differentiate between, like, the readers, the video game players, or the music listeners, and, and the music, or
Right.
the video game, or, the novel, or whatever. All right. So when you approach everything, do you like write it out like a storyline and you try and follow? You said you're a pantser, so you kind of go by the seats of your pants.
Yep.
But do you have like a rough like outline of where you're going with this?
Nope. I have an idea in my head. That's pretty much. Sometimes I might just have an opening line. Sometimes I have the idea of what I want to say, but it's all in my head. Now I'll take notes as I go along. And it's like, these are notes for an entire book. I mean, there's a handful of names on a piece of paper from a hotel thing and the name of the book. And it might have their ages or it might have one or two features or something. So, or somebody in real life that in my mind, that's what that person looks like. And I try to keep it as simple as that. Now there's something big or specific that happens in the book or in the story. A lot of times I will just jot that down, or I will highlight somebody because I know that they're dead and don't bring them in another chapter, forward. But mostly it's just in my head, and I'm working on 2 or 3 different projects every day. So this morning I wrote a couple of chapters in Dirty Deeds 12, and then this afternoon I did some research and wrote about half a chapter on the cryptid nonfiction stuff. And then when we're done here, I'll probably start a short story because I just got an invite to a short story anthology. So
Do you have a kind of a definite finale and ending to it? Like you kind of know how the tale is gonna like, like end off, how it's gonna like finalize, or what break, or do you just like go with the flow and you might change it on the fly?
there comes a point like with Dirty Deeds 12, I knew about around maybe 8 or 9. I knew I had to end this. I didn't want to do 35 books in this series. I want to finish series and just do 6-book series going forward. And so I knew 12 is the perfect number. I've done 9, I've done 3, I've done 6. Like, why not do a 12? And at that point, about halfway through it, I'm like, I know where this needs to end. I know the only sensible way this series needs to end. And so I kind of started working a little bit, some foreshadowing and a little bit towards that. Now, when I'm doing a 6-book, mostly I'll say, here's my main character and what's his arc. And so I try to figure out where's his point A in book 1, and then where's his point B at the end of book 6. And so I'm always kind of working that angle of, there are characters like Jack Reacher is a great character. There's no character arc. he just walks into a town and he kills a bunch of people and he saves the day. And they're great books. But there's no you're wondering, oh, is he upset? Is he gonna think about it? No, he's that character. I don't write those characters. I write characters with big or small, character arcs. The main character in the First Coast Thriller series is a former cop. He had a gambling problem. He was thrown off the force. His wife divorced him. He has a bad relationship with his 13-year-old daughter, and he's working at a repo place because it's the only job he could get. And all he wants to be is a cop. All he wants to do is get back and figure out how I can be on the force again. And that's the motivation. And that was all I thought about when I started these books. He has a motivation and he has something moving forward. So as I'm writing it, that's in the back of my mind of what would he do in this situation.
Did you have a definite finalization, like he's going to make it as a cop, or he's never going to make it as a cop?
No, I always try to keep that open. I always try to keep of he could die, he could become a cop, he could be something else. There's a million different ways. Try to keep it realistic. You know what I mean? Not many people, get what they want. Not many people, see, there's a lot of people that, like for you, for instance, at 12 years old, did you want to be a tattoo artist, or did you want to be something else?
Well, I wanted to be an artist, and I wanted to be a writer, right. But yeah.
Right. So I mean that's kind of all of us, and even into your, even into your 20s and your 30s, your 40s and whatnot. Not many people get to do what they want to do, what their passion is, what their love is.
Right.
And so sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes you sacrifice things because you marry somebody that you love, or you have kids or whatever, and I can no longer travel the world because I have these little brats running around the house, kind of thing. But it's satisfying for that person. So I always try to look at the characters that way, of even though you're reading it like,
on the dark side, you have, sorry, I was gonna say, on the dark side, you have people who think that they have a talent for something that they really don't. Like, they think they're a good artist and they think they're a good writer. They're like, man, you're fucking crap. And they never make it, but they never make it because they're not good.
Right. And so that's the other part of it. I mean, not every character is going to be perfect. Maybe he was, what I'm starting to think, maybe he was a bad cop. Maybe he deserved to get fired. Maybe all these things you have to think about as you're writing these books. And I don't ever sit and go, let me think about this for the next 2 weeks. I know authors who won't even write that first word until they have all of this down on paper or in their head, whatever. I don't do that. I just kind of go with it, and then I might have to drop back a little bit and change a couple of things, stuff like that. Or a beta reader will go, hey, this person is a vegan, and you had them eating a cheeseburger in chapter 6, kind of thing. You forget the little details sometimes. Right. And so, for me, and then that's the fun of it, it's creating. They're not my babies. They don't speak to me. A lot of writers will give you all that. It's just a story. I'm telling myself a story, and I happen to be writing it down. And at some point, potentially thousands or tens of thousands of people will read that story, and hopefully they will like it and want to read the next story and the next story and the next story. I'll finish a book and I'm done with that book. Once that book is published, once it's to the publisher, the edits, the cover, for everything is done with it, I'm on to the next thing. I remember some of the stuff. I have my notes back, but I'm no longer living in that particular part of my world.
Okay. Do you ever go back and revise or rewrite, or wish you rewrote old stuff?
No, I think that's a rabbit hole that I see a lot of authors. I know a woman who I will not mention her name, and she's rewritten her first 3 books like 10 times. New publishers, new covers, right, all new ideas, and I'm like, just write something else. Like the stuff you write in the beginning is garbage. 35 years ago, in 1988, I graduated. That was my senior year in high school, and I wrote a short story, a horror short story, and I got it published in a zine. and it's awful. It's an awful story. But I was 18 years old and I was writing, whatever. But I'm glad it was garbage, because imagine if that was the highlight, like that was the best story I ever wrote.
Right.
35 years later, I haven't gotten any better, And I feel like with every book, with every idea, I'm getting a little bit better and a little bit better. When people read, even when they read Dying Days, when they read that first zombie book, I mean, it was 2009 I wrote that, and that was a million years ago, and it's awful in my mind. That is an awful, very immature, very stupid book with a lot of profanity and a lot of violence and a lot of things that I wouldn't write at 53 years old now with my kids all in their 20s. I don't want to write that stuff anymore.
I look at stuff that I wrote like 15, 20 years ago, and I'm like, holy shit, what was I fucking thinking?
Yeah,
What was
exactly.
wrong with me?
Yeah.
So I've noticed it, like, I like first person a lot, and like I know Lovecraft's a big fan of first person, and I think that might be part of what inspired me. But I know a lot of people seem to be against it, and then I noticed a lot of like the indie authors in the author scene seem to be more pro first person, whereas the people that are like a more mainstream publisher, they really disliked it. What's your feeling on it?
I like it if it works for the story. So Dirty Deeds is actually first person.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, and there's no deviation from it. It's just that one point of view. But it is limiting as a writer, because you only know the character only knows what he knows. So if stuff's happening off to the side, unless somebody's explaining it to them, unless they're seeing it, a lot of things are happening that you can't just easily third person. You get inside somebody's head in the next chapter, and you figure out there's a killing off to the side. Well, your character hears about the killing if he's not looking at the game. So it makes it more of
an omniscient narrator who can say,
yeah,
this was happening here, this was happening there.
Yeah. You don't have any of that. So like in Dirty Deeds 12, I have a part where I'm writing now that he thinks somebody is dead, but it happens off stage, so you don't know, is this character alive or dead, and you're in his head constantly, of him thinking the pros and cons and what's going on in the world right now. But it took me a little while. I kind of stepped back for a couple of days and I wrote other stuff, because I'm like, how do I do that where it makes sense and the reader doesn't feel cheated? Like, if this thing really did happen to them, what I want to be able to see it. And the cheesy way would be to do like in a sitcom or something, where you throw characters into the room, the knock at the door and the new character comes in just in time to figure something. I didn't want to do that. So I was like, you know what, I have to figure out a way to write this scene so it's realistic, but the reader doesn't feel slighted because everything happened, behind the scenes on this particular part.
I feel like kind of my common line for it is like, I feel like first person is kind of like the shaky camera writing. Like when you pull it off, it's awesome. When you don't pull it off, it really, really sucks.
Yeah.
All right, so let me ask you one more writing question. Some people prefer like past tense, some people prefer present tense. What I've noticed is like, especially a lot of like publishers dislike when you go from like past present tense or present to past tense. They want you to stick with one for the entire book. And I'm not talking about the like, first year present tense, senior past tense, senior present tense. I'm not talking about like where it's confusing and all over the place like that. I'm talking about like definite transitions. What's your feeling on all that?
First off, I will say writing rules are not set in stone for any of you. Write it however you want to do. One of my favorite books of all time is The Road by
That was a great book. Great book, yeah.
It's a great book, but some people were like, "There's no punctuation in here. There's no dialogue quotes.
Yeah, but you have to go with this style. I feel like you have to kind of buy into his world,
right? Exactly, and that's what it is. So is it a bad book because of that? Heck no, I thought it was a great book. So and I like that that's your choice as a writer. That's your choice. That should always be your choice. That being said, I think you have to be aware that the reader is reading your book and they have to be immersed in your book. And the it's like the brain is always looking for you to get pulled out of a story. So if you're a writer, like for instance said, most of my dialogue, all my dialogue is going to be Bob said, or just the dialogue and then Bob having an action so you know who just said that. I don't use exasperated. I don't use shouted and yelled and the 500 other words we can use to make it fancy, because I don't want the reader to get out of that. And it's the same with the tense of, are we saying ask or are we saying asked?
Right.
And I've written a bunch of short stories, Bob asks, kind of thing. And it's fun to write that. But for me, you have to be in. You have to. I see a lot of writers now that are using changing point of view in the same, like within that same chapter without any breaks. So
Yeah.
your head jumping all the
It's like
time.
breaking the fourth wall, I feel like.
Yeah. And it's like, for me as a reader, that's jarring. That's, and I notice things like that. I notice a lot of authors and some bigger authors that are, it's a question, what's the matter with you? Bob asks, Bob said instead of Bob asks. And I'm like, well, you can do whatever you want. For me as a reader, it's one of those dumb little things that pulls me out. You asked a question, you didn't say a question, and so it's like those little things that you always, as a writer, you always worry that once you lose that reader, even for that second, are they going to go, well, this is a good place to stop? Is this, I'm going to bookmark this and maybe I'll get back to this tomorrow.
Right. They'll just cut off at that point. They won't
Yeah.
progress any further. Yeah. No, I say it like, I think some people try and be like a little bit too clever, like, like, hey, I have this huge vocabulary. I'll stuff every word that I know and I'll take in the thesaurus. So you're like, that kind of interrupts the flow. And I noticed like some of the stuff, like I love I love William Burroughs stuff, but when he did all of his cut up stuff, like that gets hard to read. But fortunately, that didn't really catch on. Like, Kill people did that, and then everyone realized it was crap. Like, I'll read it if it's Burroughs, and that's about it.
Yeah.
But all right, man. So I don't want to keep you here all day, but what else do you have to promote? What should people look out for? Do you have an Amazon authors page? Do you have a website? Do you have a blog?
So ArmandRosamilia.com. That's where you can find all of my stuff. I also write live Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Twitch. So if you're on Twitch, it's not just for gaming. There's a lot of us authors on there now, and I go on and literally you're seeing a video, you're watching the webcam of me, and I'm also whatever I'm writing is literally live in the corner as I'm typing. You're seeing the words, and there's a chat, and you ask me questions, and sometimes I'll ask the people in chat, hey, give me a good name for a dentist or something, or kind of thing, and you keep it flowing. I mean, today we got into an hour and a half talk. I wrote a lot, but we also got into an hour and a half talk of what were the crappiest 80s metal bands. So we do a lot of
If you had to name one, what would you say was the crappiest 80s metal band?
We were talking a lot of the the third generation, Sunset Strip bands like Vane and Sea Hags and those types of bands. We were just and
who would you say was the best
back from then? So I grew up. I'm a Jersey guy, so I got to see a lot of really good bands as a kid. But I mean, I grew up on thrash metal, so Anthrax is still a great band. But I also liked a lot of the, I also like going to see White Lion. I also like going to see Twisted Sister back in the day before they broke. I mean, I saw a ton of local bands, and there's a couple of guys that are in the chat that are also grew up with me in Jersey, so they'll just throw random local bands that nobody else has ever heard of. And then author Chad Lutsky is in there, and he is The Accused, like that's his band, The Accused. So he always throws those guys in. He's always thrown in, Cryptic Slaughter. He's always thrown in DRI. He's always thrown in those bands where, for me, it was the Cro-Mags. It was Agnostic Front. It was those bands that we would go to CBGBs and different places to see growing up.
Yeah, I listened to all those, but unfortunately, I did live in New York when they were all like at CBGBs. I was in
Yeah.
DC, so I saw like Minor Threat and
Oh, cool. Yeah.
you know. I wish I saw Black Flag. I never saw Black Flag, but I saw a bunch of punk bands. Their version of the CBGB's club is called the 930 Club.
My third guy. I've been there a
Yeah,
few times back in the
and
day.
and 930 used to be this awesome little place, kind of like CBGB's, and then when there was a big Nirvana, alternative
Yeah.
explosion, they bought a Radio City Music Hall, and they were never the same. But that's neither here nor there. So going back to Twitch for a minute, I'm not familiar with it. Do they need a username to see yourself?
Yeah, if you just type in Armand underscore Rosamilia on twitch.tv, I'll pop up, and like I think the last 60 or 90 days worth of videos are still up live. You can watch, and then it'll give you, if you hit follow button for me, it will email you every time I go live.
Okay.
So
And are you on any other social media sites? Like are you on TikTok where you do those little dances?
yeah, I'm on TikTok. I'm the old man on TikTok, and I say the wrong things on purpose and stuff like that. My daughter helped me get on there, and the very first video was she's like, make sure you say make sure you say book talk, hashtag book talk. So I was like, all right, # book talk, everybody, # book talk. And she's in the background. No, dad, no, it's not. It's hashtag. I'm like, that's a #. #, like I do goofy
Right.
stuff like that. I unbox stuff when I get a new book in and stuff like that. I shot a video a couple weeks ago in front of, I have a liquor cabinet, and I shot it with the liquor behind me. And there was so many comments about, what's your most expensive bottle you have back there? What are you drinking? Is that all bourbon? Is that, what else is up there? So it was like kind of fun because I had that back and forth, which you never know what's gonna be do well or not. So I'm on all the social medias, even though half of them I don't even understand. I'm on all the new ones. You can find me on Blue Sky and Threads, and I'm on
I don't even know
TikTok.
what Blue Sky is. Are you on X? It used to be
Yeah, I'm
Twitter, and
still
now it's X.
yeah, excellent. I'm still on it. Blue Sky is the better version of Twitter.
Okay.
It's actually the same guy had something to do with creating Twitter, and then he basically moved. So it's the same kind of setup, but there's not all the bullshit, not all the politics, not all the garbage so far. There's just
Right.
a ton of artists, ton of writers, and different people. So the only thing that's moved over is a lot of the internet porn chicks. They've moved over, which I'm fine with.
Are you on Instagram or Facebook?
Yep, I'm on Instagram. I have an author page on Facebook. I try not to waste too much times on social media, but I I have a thing called Buffer where it basically sends out emails and posts for me, I set them up in different times. So even in the middle of the night when I'm sleeping, there's still promotion stuff. There's still me sharing other authors and stuff going on. So it looks like I'm way more involved in social media than I actually am.
Is it posted on various sites? Like I do that, but I do that kind of manually. I just cut and paste, cut and paste, cut and paste.
Yeah, it's on Twitter and Facebook are the two main ones that it will post to it. I'm waiting for the company to start using some of the other ones. The other one I'm not on is Mastodon. That one,
I don't even know. I mean, I know who Mastodon is.
right? Yeah, that's why I was like, what, the band has their own thing. This is cool now, but I don't know. It just seems too much for me. I'm too old for a lot of this crap. A lot of the times, I'm like, I call my daughter and I'm like, hey, what should I be on this? And she's like, yeah, you're old. We don't use that anymore. So you guys can, oh, Twitter, we don't use Twitter anymore. We don't use Instagram anymore. You can go on there now.
Do you have Amazon authors page?
Yeah, I have an Amazon authors page. You just look me up. It has everything I've released on there. It's over 200 releases in my career so far. But I would say use the publication date when you update it. So it'll show you everything I've had out in the last couple of years. Those are the things I'm obviously most proud of.
Okay, and do you have a website or a blog?
ArmandRosamilia.com, and that'll give me that is mostly for the thriller stuff. You could also sign up for my newsletter on there. I do a monthly newsletter with all the new releases, and I will give away a free crime thriller short story on there when you sign up, and I'll give out audio codes for my audiobooks a lot of times as well. So
Can people write you and get like a signed copy? Like pay a
yeah,
little.
that's also, you can find that on the website too. I have a signed print copies of a lot of my stuff. If you don't see it on there, just email me, and I probably have it in stock.
Okay. All right. Well, man. Well, thank you very much for doing this. Thanks for sharing your info with me. Do you have anything else that you want to promote or say?
No, just thanks a lot, man. It was cool talking to you.
Yeah. Thank you.